First of all, to Mr. Abdullah AlSharekh, thank you for joining us. And as an investment company, utilizing the fintech and implementing and integrating the fintech in the investment, from your perspective, how it is developing in these times, and let's say after the COVID and the breach that we have in COVID, everything like that, from your perspective?
Thank you for that question, and apologies for my voice. I think it's really critical to integrate fintech solutions in all forms of daily life, and investing is a critical part of guaranteeing someone's future and present. So with the development, as you rightly said, especially after COVID, we've seen adoption increase exponentially, and it's become a critical factor in future-proofing any business, and being able to address a wider investor base, a wider market, even transcending borders and different target segments, age groups, etc. And it's become not only a good return on investment for any business that's applying fintech in its day-to-day, but also a critical existential factor for their relevance in today's world.
Yes. And the same question, let's say, for redefining or changing the landscape, Mr. Paul. What is the current state of fintech in capital markets as you see it in GCC and Kuwait specifically?
Yeah, so I think when you look at capital markets, it's probably been a sector where the role of fintech is still emerging, perhaps a little bit slower than banking and payments. And I think that's largely a result of the fact that the capital markets themselves are still maturing. But nevertheless, if you look at the entire spectrum of the value chain in capital markets from a regulatory perspective, there's really a whole host of opportunities where fintechs can play a role, whether it's on pre-trade, trade execution, or even the post-trade infrastructure. And when I think about Kuwait and the opportunities for fintechs in the capital market space, there are really some interesting opportunities that I think are more conducive to the capital market space here. And if I was to call out a few, I think, for example, if you look at the retail investor segment, there's a whole host of potential opportunities around robo-advisory, more advanced ways around how to manage wealth that can really be extended down to retail investors. That helps overall capital allocation. Furthermore, if I think about the regulator, the CMA itself, there's a whole host of regulatory technology that you can apply, which helps with market surveillance, analysis of disclosures, but also improving how you engage with the capital market ecosystem. And then maybe lastly, in terms of sort of the opportunities for Kuwait, thinking about alternative funding platforms, with a whole host of new technologies, ways of looking at different types of data, there's a real opportunity to start to extend the capital markets to other segments that might not have been tackled before when we think about SMEs, both on the equity and debt side. So, whilst, from a fintech perspective, capital markets has probably been a slightly later stage opportunity versus other areas of financial services, if you think about it targetedly, there are really some interesting opportunities and plays that could be relevant for Kuwait in the future.
Yes. Abdullah, you can hear me now? You can hear me now? Yes. So I'll try to make it louder. We have too many discussions about the changes that has been done in the, let's say, near the GCC countries. From your perspective, as a CEO of Rasameel, what are the main changes that happened to the capital market, let's say, investment funds within the GCC and Kuwait?
شيء صبحكم بالخير جميعا. شوف أنا أتبنى أو عربي صح عادي ما في مشكلة.
It's to you. It's up to you.
فيعني أتبنى فكرة إن أحب أطالع الأشياء from a different perspective وأطالعها شوية من يعني من فوق عشان أفهم شنو قاعد يصير. أنا يعني أتبنى رأي إن الحين ما في financial institution ما يعني they cannot afford not to be a fintech company. All financial institutions must be fintech organizations. So in 2008, the small companies, small startups, they had a head start against traditional banks and companies where they started to innovate. And then came COVID and 2020. This is where I think the inflection point happened, where traditional banks and traditional organizations realize that they're missing out a lot. So this is where you see now lots of banks, lots of investment companies are transforming themselves to be fintech companies. That doesn't mean that there is no existence for fintech companies. It's just that it's an ecosystem that is going towards open banking and openness where everybody serves a role and where fintechs or small startups, let me call them, they can come in and penetrate and serve a purpose, a specific purpose where they could benefit the customer and experience. And as for the capital markets, you've seen at the end of the day, it's a trust game. So the goal of a capital market, let's say if you summarize it into the stock market or the capital market itself, is to allow investors to utilize their money and buy a piece of the economy, which is companies that are listed on the market. So now with this openness and fintechs coming along, and then you see it being more democratized. يعني الحين أي واحد يقدر يفتح ويقدر يستثمر بأي مكان. It became easy, and then this brings us back to regulation, where the whole purpose of regulation is to try to control and make sure that every transaction is safe and actually reflected to the benefit of the consumer.
Yes, Abdullah. When talking about innovation and technology and changing them to fintechs and emerging and like a boom, does that mean more opportunities for SMEs or fintech or technology companies, or that means on the other side, from my perspective, that you are paving the road for the right regulation, right opportunity, right investment?
Of course, and also as Dakhil said, there is no. Eventually, every company is going to be categorized as a fintech, or adoption of fintech is not a choice. It is an existential transformation that's happening globally, and not only because of the benefits that it provides, but also the individuals, the customer, but also institutions to allow them to become more competitive, to address some points that I mentioned in my previous answer. But also, I think there's a major role for SMEs to play a big role in this transformation, because of, generally speaking, technology is asset light. So if there is opportunities for innovation, it doesn't require massive amounts of capital to start, at least. And that's why we've seen a lot of disruption by technology in this space and financial services, but generally as well. And this doesn't just apply to the region. It's, as I said, it's a global trend. And I think the very interesting dynamic that we see potentially happening across capital markets also, as these companies grow and they mature from being SMEs to major players in their sectors and taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room, so to speak. They will be major players in capital markets as well. For example, becoming publicly listed companies. And let's not forget that capital markets are not only equities capital markets, there's also debt capital markets. So they will start issuing bonds and sukuk and potentially hybrid instruments even before they become capital or publicly listed companies. So there's a major effect and many different aspects that at the end of the day will be to the benefit of everyone that exists in capital markets and tangentially as well.
Yes, 100%, that's correct. And the same question for you, Paul. The opportunities in the capital market. Like Abdullah said now that it must be a fintech company in the end. Will that make it an opportunity for investment fund to have more opportunities to invest in, or to make it difficult to choose which is the best opportunity based on the space, let's say capital market space itself?
Yeah, I think if I think about it from an investment fund perspective, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to generate value in the capital market space when we think about fintechs. I think the main challenge really here is where do you target those opportunities, and really those will be those environments where those fintechs can thrive, right? And that starts to link through to the conversation around regulation. Is the regulatory environment going to be sufficiently open to allow those fintechs to come into the ecosystem? How will the regulator help plug those fintechs into the ecosystem? Because if you think about it historically, the capital market space has been constituted by a relatively small number of players. You have an exchange, a clearing house, and then market participants. But in the future, we're going to have to find a way that we can start to integrate a whole broader diversity of players in that space. So when I think about it from an investment fund perspective, it's not going to be straightforward. It will provide opportunities, but it's going to depend on the broader macro environment to really plug those players into the ecosystem.
Abdullah, Dakhil, we saw, let's say, from the last 2 years, Rasameel cooperation and partnership with telecom, with banks, with incubators to enhance the ecosystem of SMEs and fintechs. If you can give us a big view from this part, how partnership from an investment company, investment firm, with this sector, other sectors can enhance or let's say bathe the ecosystem for the fintechs and the capital markets also.
الإيد الواحدة ما تصفق. يعني that's why we always seek to collaborate with others, and at the end of the day, and we have, although we يعني our objective is to make money, but we have a mission that we want to put Kuwait back into the map. And every time you look at statistics for the MENA region, you don't even see Kuwait transactions or companies listed there as statistics. But when you look at the gentleman before us and also the gentleman sitting here, and we don't lack any innovation, and alhamdulillah, companies that are established in Kuwait are easily expanded and benefit from the expansion, conquering other markets. So that's why we collaborate. And of course, these opportunities don't come, you cannot just own it for yourself. And at the end of the day, you have to give and take, and for the ecosystem to grow. One thing that I believe that is so unique about Kuwait is that it's a small demographic, but high basket size or ticket size. But that's not enough. We have to grow even further and open up the markets. So that's why we collaborate, and that's why we have to form these collaborations, not only within Kuwait, also within at least GCC neighboring countries.
Yes. Abdullah, back to you. Let's say from a different view or perspective, let's say from an SME that always needs somebody to take the danger and the risk with him, from an investment firm, always trying to minimize the risk that is there. In these worlds, in this technology, in this adaptation for the technology toward the capital markets, you mentioned when going to the IPO or issuing different investment tools. Will these two issues, the risk factor or view from the SME side and the risk factor from the investment side, will have a point in the middle that we can solve this problem?
Yeah. Risk is a fact of life. If you're crossing the road, there's a statistical, rate of risk you're taking and doing anything. So the same applies to investing. And actually, as you know, there's the rule: the greater the risk, the greater the reward, and vice versa. So there's definitely a place for calculated risk and studied risk within any investment thesis, within any asset allocation strategy. And just because there is potential exposure to risk should not be a reason why people avoid a certain investment, as long as you know what kind of risks that you're taking and how to mitigate those risks and to manage that. So that being said, of course, there's going to be a point where the risks involved in investing in fintechs comes down over time as the sector develops, as the opportunities become clearer. As an example, Kamco Invest has exposure to the fintechs locally, internationally, in various ways for us to be part of this innovation, to have, for example, you call it like an option value, to see which ideas work and which ones develop. For example, Robinhood, etc. I'm not going to name the whole portfolio, but there's, even banks, digital banks, Mercury, etc. So this fits within the asset allocation strategy, not only for us, but potentially for anyone else, and is going to be a critical part of any investment thesis.
Paul, so if we are going to have the point in the middle that investment and SMEs, let's say fintech, meet together, is there something more that we can do from, let's say, the whole ecosystem, the capital markets, the investment funds, the SMEs itself, regulators, from your point of view?
I mean, so that's a space that I think is tremendously interesting, and I think it's a space that no one's really managed to crack. I think we've seen various attempts at it, but it's not been that successful. What I think fintech provides the opportunity to do is, for example, be able to bring to life relatively unstructured data, and data is typically a challenge for SMEs when we think about the capital market space. What we're also able to do is use platforms and various technologies to better connect prospective investors and democratize investment as well, to better place capital to those SMEs. But again, I think all of that requires one additional party, which is bringing a regulatory framework around that. And it's not straightforward, but I think today's technologies do allow for better placement of capital, better usage of data, particularly around disclosures, where it's not so easy for SMEs to provide the types of data you would typically expect from larger corporates. So the opportunity is there. I think the one last thing I would just mention here on that point is a lot of the solutions that exist today are obviously international, and it's how you also work with your broader FDI partners to bring some of those players into the country. So it's also a bigger economic play as well around that.
Yes. And considering the data that is crucial for any investment to be done, Dakhil, is there enough data that we need or we have, let's say in Kuwait specifically, that can determine what is the best investment, what is the best opportunity that we can choose, or we still lacking this significant data, or let's say the source itself?
Short answer, there is a huge lack of data, and it's been there for a while, and I think that's what we need to do is to come up and bring out the statistics and to show that there is activity. And also there is another exercise that I believe we should do, and also to understand what are the gaps and what the market really needs for the consumer to be active onto those fintech platforms. So I don't think there is enough data, but if you look closely, I think you will be able to find those kind of opportunities.
Yes. Okay. So, gentlemen, we have, let's say, 5 minutes. If we are going to discuss how to enhance, evolve our ecosystem from your own perspective, how we can do more from that, Mr. Abdullah.
I think that's a very important question, because any ecosystem has rules and regulations, and I think as Paul had mentioned earlier, there's a big role that the regulators play to balance their role in regulating, especially when it comes to allowing for innovation. So any development needs change, innovation, and to balance this, leaving room for innovation without over-regulating, without being afraid of risk, but managing it in a way where it's a tight balance that needs constant tuning. But to allow the ecosystem to really thrive, there needs to be both room for enabling and room for innovation, as well as rules and regulations to make sure that it's done in a very healthy way.
Thank you very much, Paul.
So I think, firstly, I have no doubt that there's a load of opportunity in Kuwait. We hear about all of the ideas, and I think Talabat is a good example about when you bring an idea and bring access to capital markets and funding, what can happen. What I think is going to be important, and when we look at market development roadmaps, is first and foremost getting the core infrastructure of the market functioning in a way that makes it easier for people to transact and engage with capital markets. That's critical. And then, to the point just made now, is starting to create the environment which allows for a safe testing of new ideas, new opportunities around the fintech space. We've seen that with the CBK and Sandbox initiative. Something similar could be useful. And then I think the third wave is then thinking about sort of what new products and asset classes could be brought. Again, it's a very big focus now on equity, but there's also a huge debt side that we can think about as well.
Yeah, I think that's Dakhil.
How to improve the ecosystem قصدك صح؟
Yes.
هذا السؤال. أنت سألت عن عظيم الحين. there is so much room for improvement. أنا أعتقد يعني أي شيء نسويه راح يكون إضافة إن شاء الله. I'm pro تحالفات. I'm pro إنه يصير في نوع من الاتحادات خصوصا حق الأساميز ولا حتى حق الفينشر كابيتال. أنت عارف يعني been pushing for that for a while. بلس أن to collaborate مع الجهات الرقابية. الجهات الرقابية أعتقد عندهم كنز من المعلومات وكنز من الداتا اللي ممكن إحنا نستفيد منها ونطلعها and we extract it and نرتبها بطريقة معينة أن to show where are the gaps وشلون الطريقة اللي نقدر نرتبها بحيث أن الواحد يقدر يعرف وين الجابس اللي بالسوق وين ممكن يستفيد منها. أشياء ثانية اللي ممكن نسويها اللي هو events مثل هذه تتكرر. فيعني أشياء مثل هذه.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and for your information and good talk. That's, I hope all the best for our ecosystem that we evolve to a better utilizing the investments and opportunities, and also for them, the other side, for the opportunities to be more educated and more evolved to have an investment. And thank you very much again, ladies and gentlemen.